You already know this one. A parrot doesn't really talk. It just copies. It hears a sound, plays it back, and there's nothing behind it. We even built the idea into the language. When a person repeats something they don't understand, we say they're parroting. Nobody home, behind the words. So, here's the uncomfortable part. For 30 years, one gray parrot sat in a lab and slowly took that comfortable little assumption apart. His name was Alex. And by the end, the scientists studying him had stopped asking whether he could mimic words. They were asking something much harder, whether he meant them. So, today, let's actually walk through the case. Not the cute version, where a bird says, "I love you," and everyone cries. The real one. The evidence that a parrot understood. The very good reasons some smart people refuse to believe it. And the strange place the truth ends up sitting, which turns out is more interesting than either side wanted it to be. First, let's be fair to the myth, because it really isn't stupid. Parrots do mimic. That part's true, and there's an even better reason to be skeptical, and it has a name. In the early 1900s, a horse in Berlin called Clever Hans seemed to do arithmetic by tapping his hoof. Crowds, lost their minds. Then, a psychologist named Oscar Pfungst tested it properly, and the whole thing fell apart. Hans couldn't count at all. He was reading the tiny, unconscious shift in posture that came over his questioner the moment the count hit the right number, and stopping right there. He wasn't solving math. He was solving people. So ever since, anyone claiming an animal understands has to clear that bar first. Maybe the animal is just reading you? Which means when a parrot says the right word, the careful scientist's first instinct isn't wow, it's prove it isn't a trick. And honestly, that's the correct instinct. So, how do you even prove it? In 1977, a graduate student named Irene Pepperberg, who just finished a PhD in theoretical chemistry of all things, bought a 1-year-old African gray from a pet shop and named him Alex. So, she didn't go hunting for a special bird. She let the store pick one at random, on purpose, so nobody could accuse her of choosing a genius. Then, she taught him with a method called model/rival, which is basically two people trading words back and forth while the bird watches who gets the reward. Over the years, Alex built up a confirmed vocabulary of more than 100 words. He labeled 50 objects, 7 colors, 5 shapes, and counted quantities up to 6. He even made a few words up. Handed an apple he had no label for, he called it a banary, banana plus cherry. 2 things he did know, stitched into one new thing, which is not really something a recording does. But vocabulary isn't the interesting part. A tape recorder has a vocabulary. Here's the bit that's genuinely hard to wave away. In 1987, Pepperberg held up 2 familiar objects in a pairing he'd never been drilled on and asked him what was the same about them, or what was different. Not name this. A category. Was it the color, the shape, or the material? And he got it right roughly 7 times out of 10 on combinations he'd never been tested on. You can't memorize your way to that. To answer, he had to actually compare 2 things and pull out the single quality being asked about. That isn't playback. That's a small act of reasoning, kind of happening behind the eyes of a bird. And then, there's the moment that honestly breaks my brain a little. One day in 2005, the team was testing his counting with sets of colored blocks. They asked him which color had a certain number on the tray, and that number just wasn't there. Alex looked and said, "None." Now, nobody had taught him that. He'd only ever used none for whether 2 objects matched, never for an amount. On his own, he took the idea of nothing and carried it over into the world of numbers. A bird had reached for the concept of 0. Pepperberg published it that same year, and 0, just so we're clear, is something human kids usually don't grasp until they're 3 or 4. A brain the size of a shelled walnut had quietly beaten most toddlers to the idea of nothing. Now here's where the skeptics get their say, and they've earned it. A psychologist named Herbert Terrace, who'd run his own famous and far messier project teaching a chimp to sign, looked at all of this and basically said, slow down. To him, Alex wasn't using language at all. He was running a very complicated set of learned responses, cued by the moment, chasing a reward. A brilliant trick, not a mind. And, to be fair, his isn't a cheap objection. It's exactly the worry that made Pepperberg's careful controls matter in the first place. The genuinely uncomfortable thing is, you can't fully prove him wrong. We can't climb inside Alex's head. We never could. But notice what that objection quietly assumes. I mean, that real understanding has to look like ours, run on a brain shaped like ours, pass our tests. Maybe that was never the right question at all. Does the parrot understand the way a human would? Maybe. We were really asking a bird to pass as one of us. Because, weirdly, the myth got it backwards. Parrots just parrot makes the bird small. It shrinks Alex down into a feathered tape recorder with good timing. But the evidence doesn't make him more like us. It makes him stranger than that. It says a mind running on completely different equipment, nothing like a human brain at all, can still wander into ideas we thought were ours alone. Sameness, difference, nothing. That is not a smaller story than a bird who loved his owner. It's a much bigger one, honestly. And on the question of whether there was ever anybody home behind those words, Tilo's notebook says otherwise. So, do parrots really understand the words they say? The honest answer is the annoying one. We don't fully know. And maybe we never will, but the simple version is dead. There was something going on in there that just mimicry can't cover. Alex died in 2007, suddenly, at 31. Far too young for a kind of bird that can live past 50. Pepperberg later called it the worst day of her life. The night before, as she put him in his cage like every other night, he said the thing he always said. You be good. I love you. See you tomorrow. We'll probably argue forever about how much of that he understood. And maybe the arguing is the whole point. We keep demanding that other minds prove they're just like ours, when the wonder was always that they don't have to be. And that should humble us. Stay curious. And if you'd rather not stop at one strange mind, there's a whole shelf of them right here if you want to keep going.